might be wise. If you want to sit on the floor, yalla. um, yeah, that's fine. Cool. Excellent. I think you've.
Wow.
Well, yeah. I don't know if it's for him or for me, but. Right?
That's certainly not my pitch, is it? Let's be honest.
That's the picture, man. Welcome back, everyone. So, before I introduce you, just to remind everyone, there is a lovely competition. So on LinkedIn, so please take pictures, share your thoughts. There is a beautiful hamper to win, and it's a beautiful one. And I think the draw will be at 5 today in the room upstairs. But there are also plenty of other gifts. So automatically you will also be competing for a £100 voucher Amazon. You will have also beautiful stuff. So please join the competition. But now, I know you all come for Lewis. Pressure, man. So, a little bit of bio. So you've been in digital industry for 10 years as both consultant and head of analytics. And on your day-to-day basis, you help grow the digital channel performance for your client through data performance monitoring and project platform creation. Now you lead up a global team as the head of visualization for MEA in your business optimization. So please put your hands together and give a very warm welcome to Lewis.
That's a lot of people. It just goes to show the power of visualization in an organization or a festival with different things going on. It's really powerful to see so many people here. So thank you on a Saturday for coming down. I really appreciate it. We've done my introduction, so I don't need to worry about that too much. But a big hello from me. I'm astounded and kind of flabbergasted so many people are in this room. So if you keep coming in, it's all right. File in. Today is all about creative visuals and how we put together a framework, if you will, of how we can put together the perfect data every time. So there's going to be two parts to this one. The first one is going to be hard-hitting, a bit of going down a rabbit hole of visualization and just getting our minds set after the coffee break that we're all in. And then we're going to do some stuff to leave you with some 7 key points of what perfect data looks like. So without any further ado, let's go in. Question I'm always going to ask, and I'm not going to put anyone under pressure because that's just the wrong thing to do, but if anyone wants to put the hand up and say, I think I know, feel free. So what's the key question that unites us all in this diverse and talented room? Now, I've been around and seen lots of different people that are data analytics, data science, cybersecurity, IT professionals, everything. The whole mix is in this building today. Does anyone have any ideas what unites us all, I guess? Better, yeah, absolutely. It's not the answer I was looking for, but it's a good answer all the same. It's not the one written down. Actually, everything that we do from start to finish is to help a user to make a decision, take some sort of action. And when we say user, we think about an audience, a stakeholder, a user in that position. So all the way through this presentation, different references to the word user. But actually, it's about going over the event horizon and passing on information for someone to take an action from. And in the world of data visualization, we call that inform or educate. And we'll break that down a little bit in a second as well. So the 2 key categories. So when I proposed to do the talk today, there was 3 key things that I wanted to get across. The first one is my passion for data visualization, which hopefully will come out in this talk at some point. Secondly, I wanted to touch on the framework that we'll talk about later on, which was by a gentleman called Till, who works for DHL. And also this, which I think is the massive paradigm shift that's starting to happen, or has happened in the last decade, and still continues to carry on. And it was Meeks that said, for companies to succeed with data visualization, archaic view of data, and push for the adoption and spread of principles associated with art, design, and journalism. And when I say paradigm, that's because we're moving from information and data structured into art, design, and journalism. So does anyone know about the left brain and right brain theory that we all kind of live off, right? See some nodding heads. I am not left-brained in any way, shape. Left-brained is numerical, problem-solving, intuition. I'm definitely much more art and creation and color. So everything that you guys do, I'm in awe of because I can't do, not without teams and help and other people. But anything else we learn in art, design, and journalism. So it's really key of information that's paradigm shift. So we call this user-subject resonance, or USR. And it's the beating heart, the very core of the data universe. Everything that we do. And I think Phil Simon said it best. And with everything we do from a data creative point of view, we need the structure and framework. And that goes without saying, you know. We run around free form, and structure is what we're going to try and talk about today in terms of our facilitating the right framework for understanding. So there's 3 points to this. There's the presentation of data, which if you imagine somebody's just done an Excel spreadsheet and said, there you go, there's a spreadsheet, enjoy that. That's just a presentation of information. Representation is we start to inform and educate an audience. It's when we start to use that information to tell a convincing story, to drive an action on the back of it. So if we think about that, could be a graphic, could be the platform that you've built from UX design, all those different elements come into play when we're talking about representation of data. For me, in my job, it's all about reporting and e-commerce reporting and data in that sense, but it can be a whole field of what we're looking for. So I took ages trying to get this one right, and it was only on the train down from Manchester at 5 o'clock this morning that I kind of got in my head what I need to talk about with this. It's very late in the day, so bear with me. Oh, it's a big one. Right, so if you imagine black holes, I like space, everyone likes black holes, and now the research says there's white holes on the other side. So this yellow line here represents. So if you imagine everything from a data focus point of view, everything we do in terms of analytics, data science, data engineering, IT, everything that we do sits in the data focus section. In the yellow line, the event is immediately when we pass it over to the audience or the stakeholder at the same time. And the first bit is that the wealth of information that we get now turns into data visualization. And the two things will always work independently. If you have information, we need to be able to show that information to a user. So what started to happen now is we get what's called data storytelling. And that's because the wealth of visualization that's occurred now needs to be told a better way. And at the very top, which is the business communications, has started to eat into that. So there's now a demand for businesses, clients, stakeholders to understand the data storytelling. And that's what we call USR at that point. Does that make sense? Hopefully, eventually after the event horizon, that's the white hole, so everything escapes into the things that you see. And I think it's David McCandless who put this in the best possible way. So we're all like a quote. Don't want to go down the rabbit holes of quotes, and I think there's only 2 more in this entire section. But he said, quite clearly, by visualizing information, we turn it into a landscape that you can explore with your eyes, a sort of information map. And when you're lost in information, an information map is kind of useful. So I'm going to tell you about my information map, and I'll try and get through it as quick as possible. However, this is the punch. So I want you to talk about analytics in a way different and try and get out of that mindset, and let's just focus our creativity. So this is poignant. A little boy that didn't quite make it to safety, and this happened in September. And the reason why it stuck in my mind is because I dressed my son that day in the same clothes, took him to nursery at the same point, and when I was coming home on the tram from Manchester to south suburban Manchester, I saw the image pop up on my Facebook feed. It struck a chord with me emotionally, and it was very difficult to kind of put into context. But if we think about the event horizon, and everything that happened up until this point where the photograph was taken as data analytics, data focus. I know it's a lot for me. So what we need to do in this sense is the event horizon to focus. So let's talk about the visualization of that and how that occurred. So if you can see just the line, I know it's quite faint, but it is there, I promise. And right at the very center, 15, this data is from Google Trends, for the word refugee. And the word refugee, at the very moment that that photograph was taken, you can see something massive happened, and that's how we visualize that core information that's come across. So let's tell the narrative behind that. So I'm not into politics in that sense. I don't want to dumb down anything, question anyone's theory. But being released, the BBC was talking about Calais, it was talking about migrants, the word Syrian refugees wasn't even mentioned. We were showing imagery of people going through holes in fences and trying to lock down our borders. It's very different language. 2015, even the government was talking about refugees for the first time. And if we take information into sentiment analysis, God bless Cambridge Analytica, we could do this kind of thing. So first thumbprint at the very side there, left-hand side there, we can see the word migrant, we can see government, we can see all those things. That brings up that core text at the very top. I'm not trying to read it. It doesn't sound very good. Secondly, it was completely different. And for the first time, we could see the word refugee. Yeah, I was just going to say, is that better to talk on that? So we could see the word refugee. We could see things like Turkey, Syrian, children, Hungary, moving across. And the change to empathy was absolutely huge. It was massive at that core time. So empathy is a big thing in data visualization at the moment. And you'll see lots of different people talking about it on Twitter in different ways that they're kind of mentioning how empathy and resonance affects clients' behaviors, audience behaviors, and stakeholders' behaviors, and that's key, absolutely important. So we're going to dive into that a little bit more, but the key point from this section, just for everyone to understand, is that the main driver of the USR, the subject resonance in this one, was a big movement for empathy. And so it affected a change. And that's the wonderful thing about what we do in visualization, just to emphasize that point. And it can. So every time you see lots of information, think about that event horizon, think about how you can move that information over so people can see it, and concentrate. Sometimes, actually, only a single data point might be enough to tell that story. Every single piece of information has a data story behind it. Okay, that's enough of the deep stuff. How did I get into this? So I know it reads right to left and it should read left to right, and I sincerely apologize that it's terrible, I know, but I'm not there now. I'm over here now. But just a very quick potted history of who I am. I was a semi-professional footballer, did quite make it professionally for these clubs here, but then when my career finished, I decided to stay in CRM data, segment data, audience data, supporter data, that kind of thing, and it was all about presenting information back to the board to make strategic changes on. So that was very much information-based. Then when my little boy was born, I moved back to Manchester from Stoke and started looking at working at digital agencies. And from then, I moved over to head of analytics for McCann, which is the UK business. But obviously, we do bits of work with which is Universal McCann, and also McCann World Group, help advise in terms of visualization on. Just to touch on that, and it'll be the last thing I mentioned about my work, apart from one more slide. But some of the big clients we do data visualization for and data storytelling for. So we've got things like Microsoft, Novartis in there, Aldi, which was great because we helped explain why their brand proposition is now 4th biggest UK grocer in the world, in the UK. Things like we've helped with Intel to a point, and then Lloyds Bank on there as well, TSB. But a big passion for me has always been about data visualization and data storytelling. So we were shortlisted this year for the World Visualization Data Prize. It was a huge amount of money to win as well. I was gutted we didn't win it, but effectively that's what it is. We're waiting on results for the Data Superstar that we've entered this year, and also we were winners of Measure Camp in London, which is an ungagged conference, which is brilliant. And that was to showcase the rise of homelessness in Manchester. So we're very passionate about what we do in terms of how that displays. So Chris, you could say, I'm a data creative at heart, right? So what is a data creative? It's totally different from everyone else that kind of exists in the analytics world. There's a little space for me sat in the corner doing the things that I do, just passing off information, going, yeah, that looks nice, let's just pass that to clients and then stuff like that. But effectively, it's the left brain, right brain theory, which I touched on before. So we know what it means. It's absolutely fine. We can skip on for that. You can see the sliding scale moving over towards me, and that's great fun as well at the same time. So here's where I sit. And you can sit anywhere across the scale. Doesn't matter what you do in analytics, you can sit on the left side, it's absolutely fine. You can sit on the right side, it's absolutely fine, but you will find your niche at the same point. Sounds really patronizing. I apologize. Let's get on to the good stuff. But just to recap that. So if we think creatively, and we look to either inform or educate, and we think about the user, USR is not the tip of the iceberg, it's the center of the universe. So it's super important. And there's always a role now for the data visualization specialist. It's a growing field. It's starting to be commercially seen and used within agencies and across the board. Okay, that's that bit out of the way. Let's talk about some technical stuff that we can all learn and take back with us. So how do we achieve a perfect design framework? Anyone have a clue? Anyone want to put the hand up and have a guess? No, it's okay. But the first thing we should know from the first one, it's always about the user, right? User first. Audience, user, stakeholder. Always put them at the center. Sounds patronizing. I apologize. It is what it is. The sooner we put them at the first, the better it is. This lovely gentleman, his name is Till, I mentioned before. And when I went down to Measure Camp a couple of years ago, I remember we were going to collect our award, actually, that we won. But I opened the door. I sneaked inside this door, and there was a guy in there. And he looked very much like him because it was him. But he had everyone sat round him in a big circle. And he was talking away, and he had no presentation. He just had a marker pen, and he was tapping out this design framework to everybody walking around. And I was captivated. So I went over to speak to him and said, look, what's this about? I've got these ideas. I can do stuff with data, and I can make it look pretty. And he said, look, it's all about this. He said, he's German, by the way, so I apologize to anyone German, but it doesn't necessarily translate too well in English, but it gets there. He says it's about people and a bit of empathy. It's understanding the relevance in the business and using the right format to deliver an elegant structure and meaningful context with explanations via text and colour. And from post-COVID, when we met up, which is like 4 or 5 years ago, we still keep in contact today, and hopefully you'll see this recording at some point and you'll know that everything I do is probably based on what he does. But it's super important. So you can see the acronym of PERFECT there with people, empathy, relevance. And we'll go through those each one specifically now. The key thing to remember about this before we start, it's not the layout which makes information perfect. Don't think of it as a 2D platform. Don't think of it as a diagram, an infographic. Think of it as how you can help a business to receive fast insights, right? Lead into the right actions. So that could be 3D. It could be the way you use the API connections. It could be where you get information quickly from one place to another. How you bring to life what it is that you're trying to do at any one specific point in time. And this framework will still help you with that. So the 3 core things from that. Number 1, understanding your stakeholders, which we'll talk about in depth. Number 2 is how to define structure and a design that works. And number 3, it's always about customized content. Bespoke just doesn't cut it. And when we talk about empathy in analytics and visualization, this one specifically really helps resonate with the people that you're trying to connect with. So, let's dive in with people. The first thing to remember, and I'll see if I can remember that. I've got time, it's fine. I'll talk about the case studies as long as I go along. So, I've been in a room before with a client, and we've sat down, and we've talked about what it is that they want to do with a new design, a new report build, a new structure. And we, and my team, come from this section, the your view. So we see the metrics, we see the dimensions, we know what they want. It's absolutely fine, we can go away and just get that done. But actually, from their point of view, they see it as our conversions. They tell a different story. It does not the same thing. They see objectives. So we have to meet somewhere in the middle. And when we meet somewhere in the middle, oh, I've got a laser, look at that, amazing. So when we meet somewhere in the middle, we can look at the overall vision for the business. And we sat in that room for 2 hours, and we weren't allowed to talk about anything other than the business aims. We weren't allowed to talk about objectives per se, because each different stakeholder in the room had different objectives, and we weren't allowed to talk about metrics. And what we found from the business that was trying to grow was it's trying to grow in a different way than what these guys had said and what we were prescribing. And actually, it was all about raising the brand. So we needed PR, we needed content in there as well in that room, and it opened up a whole scale to be able to talk about. So when we just say we're just going to build a report and we're going to sieve these dimensions in it because this is what's described, it's not empathetic to what we need. And that's not empathetic to what the business needs. So talk about the business first and invest that time. I guarantee that a process and all those times afterwards where you spend all the commercial billions just basically going through the same changes can be sorted out at the very beginning. Okay. Empathy. So I don't know about using mapping empathy. It's a very right brain way of thinking, but just bear with me again. Mapping empathy is absolutely crucial. And it's really important. This slide was done really late in the day, as you can probably tell. But what we're looking at is how an empathy map, when you sit down with your audience, users or stakeholders, how that works for them. And the four key things you need to ask yourself is what do they see, what do they say, what do they do, and how do they feel? And very similar to the last slide when we talk about putting the time up front, we're going to want to make sure we do all this stuff here because it's all really great. So we might want to build a platform for them that we use and it's within our tool suite and that's fantastic. But it might not be perfect for them at the same time. The key one for this is that we did a report the other year for a small tea company, and he basically said to me when we were sitting down doing our briefing session, he said, look, I don't believe in data, don't understand it, don't want it, I just want to know that my business is doing well. And we said, okay, that's fine. Well, we're going to use a simple structure. We're going to use Google Analytics. We think your Google Analytics is good, we'll audit it and it all looks fine. So we'll just use that to look at revenue. He said, well, I don't really worry about revenue. There's a certain conversion type I've got. I don't know if anyone uses Google Analytics in this room. But a goal completion is goal number 10, goal number 1. He was looking at number of teapots sold. So while we in our reports were saying, yeah, goal completion number 10s are going through the roof, he was like, I don't know what number 10 is. So metrics and dimensions that are named different in taxonomy are completely different from what that company will see. So it's really important to make sure you speak the language. That's a simple one, but really effective at the same time. And when we talk about design, it could do it in our own branding, because we've got our own suite of tools. It's simplistic to do that. It brings revenue down. They might want to put it as an internal document. That's something that's used over and over again. I mean, one of our financial clients are the same. They won't have one of ours. They'll have to have it in an internal document because it breeds empathy between us and the client that we're speaking to at the same time. And I guess the key one at the bottom is how they feel. So we might say, look, we're going to give you this lovely static report. It's got everything in it. It's dashboard. It's amazing. It's brilliant. It tells you the story. And they feel completely disengaged with it because it doesn't do what they want them to do. They don't want the dynamic stuff. They just want to be able to pass that information on and make a call, strategic call, really quickly. So mapping empathy is really important. And that part of that briefing document that you consume or consider at the very beginning, invest in that time is really important to go with that as well. Relevance. Here's a tricky one. Nothing that can be counted counts, and not everything that can count be counted. I still can't quite get my head around that, but it's very true. So, what do we mean by this? Well, I've done it in the past. And what I've done is I've shoved all the information into a report and said, you know what, here's everything. Right? And they're going, oh, I don't need any of that. None of that makes any sense whatsoever. What I want is just a small piece of information that I can make a decision on. And they go, all right, okay. So we dove back into it and started to build a framework based on this. And what we see is that there's something called visualiser control and viewer control at the two ends of the scale. So we, again, sit on the left-hand side because, you know, we've built the thing. Everyone in this room is curating data. You know what you want to do. On the right side of it, they go, hang on, these questions I've got to ask myself. Like, what does it mean to me, though? What does this information mean? And I go back to that story about the chap with the tea company. He said to me, I just need one graph. That's all I need. I don't need everything else. I just need one thing to tell me that my business is in good hands and the cost implications of giving money to you as an agency is driving revenue. So one graph really works. So cost and revenue, that's it. And what you can do then is you can go into this middle section again, this sweet middle, and we talk about interpreting the data. And that's really important too. So the three different types, you've got the perceiving on the left-hand side, interpreting in the middle, and comprehending on the right-hand side. So let's just dig down a little bit into that. I don't know if anyone knows these two people. One you've seen before. Everyone should know this guy, right? So this is Mr. Tuft and Mr. McCandless. Two ends of the scale, completely different ends of the scale. So one is particularly left-sided brain, one is particularly right-sided brain. So David McCandless sits on the far side, much more like me. Author of Information is Beautiful. If you've not read it, please do. It's a brilliant book at the same time. And he basically says, just represent the selective data. So when we talk about representation, so find the story, the narrative that sits within the data set and use that to inform or educate. It's to tweak the visuals to build the narrative and design to emphasize the story. Where Mr. Tuft on the far side says, just show everything. Make it really minimalistic, black and white, give them everything, let them make a decision on that. Neither is right or wrong, but your audience will tell you which one they sit closer to, and that will make the biggest difference. How does that work in principle? Okay, so on the left-hand side, we've got the deep marketing analysts, people like me with a bald head and a bit of a beard and some glasses on, designed specifically for that reason. Also the sales and marketing, who sit somewhere in the middle because they want to interpret that data, and then we've got the CEO of the big business. So starting again from the left, they're not time consumed. It's absolutely fine for them to receive all the information because they want to dive deeper and build information from the back of it that they can present with their clients or their internal stakeholders and team. So use everything principle for those people if that's the best way forward, because they can perceive that data in any way they wish. They're trained to do so, that's their job. Interpreting the data, now, again, the guys in the middle are going to, the sales in this example, are going to be making different decisions. This is where objectives and dimensions and metrics comes into play, and a good choice to be in, because they want to be showing sales results or conversion rates or things that show that their job is of value and worth. And that then goes then to the CEO at the top, who's got no time. He just needs an instant decision and to make something happen in real time. So for that, it makes better to tell the story from that rest of that data that you've sent. So 3 dashboards, effectively, or 3 reports from one data set will talk to 3 different people or sets of people in 3 different ways. And that doesn't have to be those 3 people. It can be any. If you think within the business or the stakeholders or audience you're designing for, just think of it that way. Which one's going to want which elements of information, and do it from there. Format. It's a very simplistic one. What do we know? It's a question. What do we know? Effectively, I don't know. What do we know? When we talk about format, there's 2 different rules of thumb here. These are the very basic principles of which information somebody will take and do something with. So either a dashboard, reports, information, infographics, that kind of thing. You'll have slides and presentations in a PowerPoint, written reports, if it's a fiscal report or an annual report or something like that, or verbal presentations, which is effectively, next slide, please. Now, your client might work on something that they just want to pass around slides and presentation from a PowerPoint deck. However, you build your reports to function with connections that work better in a dashboard. So it's a completely different rule of thumb to think about presenting data in a different way in a PowerPoint than it is with a dashboard. But there are different ways you can get around that. So, for example, things like Power BI or Looker Data Studio, or basically anything you can design to look like a PowerPoint slide. So that's one way of getting past it. You can also use connections in Power BI to embed slides into a PowerPoint so it can work in real time. So the description between format doesn't have to be set in stone. You can still utilize your information to make that process quicker for the audience. That builds empathy if you can do it that way. And it will better than going into a room with a stakeholder and saying, do you know what? Yeah, you're going to do it in slides, but we're going to do it in real-time data. It's going to embed, and every month it's just going to update itself, and you'll be fine, good to go. There's no worries, just write your commentary on the top, and it's all done. I love it, right? It's fantastic. Empathy building, it's superb. So considering the right format is super important at the same time. Elegant. This is one of my favorite bits. Nearly there now, everyone. Nearly there. This is one of my favorite bits. The rule of 220-200. Again, show of hands. Anyone knows what the rule of 220-200 is? Hope not, because that means I'm completely on my own in a niche, which is brilliant. Okay, one of my favorite things when it comes to design, and something that really you want to take away with yourself today, is when you leave this room, go and think about this one particularly. I've forgotten his name. Marco Hassan, of course it was, I did remember. He said, and any bit of information, if you want to tell a story with it, it's 2 seconds to understand the headline. That's all anyone's going to give an interest. They can't care about anything less. 2 seconds to make the snap decision. 20 seconds to start holding thought and engaging yourself about that. 200 seconds is to make a strategic change based on that information. And you all know this because you all see it. If you look at the Guardian newspaper online at the end, you'll see a headline at the top. It's 2 seconds. And if you think about a newspaper, you walk into I don't know, W.H. Smith's, for example, and you see all the magazines or newspapers on the side. If you see a headline that says, "Man walks on moon," Right, brilliant. Man walks on moon, that's the one I'm looking at. I'll take that, thank you. Then you might see a photograph, a description just underneath it, and that'll give you a little bit of resonance to the story and help build empathy. And then underneath it, you'll have lots of data points, information, subtext, all the different, I don't know, interviews that people have that give you a chance to be able to build your own perception of what that story is. So when we see that online as well, we see headline, we see a brief timeline, we see a big image, and then we see subtext underneath. So when we look at Google Analytics 4, not Universal Analytics, but Google Analytics 4, it's pretty much the same thing. You see the call to actions at the top. I can see that's up or down pretty quickly. I can see that graph, yeah, it's trending the right way. And then I can also start to make headway into what the rest of the journey and dive down and see what I need to know. When we're reporting, we do exactly the same thing. It's very similar to The Guardian, actually. So again, you'll have the call-out text up or down on your different metrics. Have the subtext underneath, which is fine to have some commentary based on what you're seeing there. And then you'll also have a trend graph as well. And one step further in something else that we do is you don't even need to look at the metrics at the top. The color code will tell you whether you're up or down. If that's all green, great, let's move on. If it's all red, we've got a problem. We need to fix it out. So you can see how different elements of design will work quite sufficiently across the case. Bringing that to life will make a big difference to somebody's empathy and resonance when they talk. Okay, context. It's my favorite books as well. It's a storybook, storytelling. Every story that you read has a rise and fall, a natural rise and fall. And this is super important. So the other day, I asked ChatGPT to create me a story about a sloth and a tomato for my little 5-year-old in bed, and I read it to him. And as I was reading it, I'm thinking, oh my God, it's done it in seconds, but it does have a rise and fall. Like, this is amazing. And we do that with data too, in terms of design. It's super important. So there's two different facets to this. One is you group, One is you group the metrics together. So if you've got a report, again, let's think of it from Google Analytics that's talking about traffic. There's no point putting traffic at the very top and then hiding your final traffic graph three pages down because you've lost that interest between the two. So build the story as you go along. In this one, we see a nice opening title section. Good, builds empathy. Second one, we can have right there. It's, we've got the nav bar on the left-hand side, our selection data on the side, a menu across the top, and then we group our traffic metrics together to tell that story. Same for engagement, and same for conversion at the same time. And what you do is where your company, client, stakeholder is invested the most, that's where you want to put the peak of the story. Seems really odd to think of it that way, but there will be a natural rise and fall. They'll open up a report, look at it, it's the same as last spring, that's brilliant, but I want to look at the things that I need to know. At that point, you build that story on. So everything that we've done from 220, 200, everything we've done from the event horizon, everything accumulates in something like this. Because when you present that information back in any platform, in any UX, you always get the best results, I think, without any research, from this way, grouping, unifying your metrics and objectives. And the last one, which is text. Again, really easy to understand. If your audience are left-brained, you're better with numbers. If your audience is right-brained, better with text. And there's no hard and fast rule when it comes to putting numbers and text together. You'll sit along the middle. Text can come in different forms, lots of different formats. So in some of our work, obviously, we'll set the scene with our design work at the front. A nice welcome, hello, the name of the person from the stakeholder that you're sending it to is always really good there, to be honest. Hi, William, this is really good. Welcome to your report. We'll also specify what the page entitles, what's happening on this page, so you can read it from a text point of view. Every chart is denoted with text, every single point, and we'll also, where we think there's information that will be hard to determine, we'll just explain that with some text as well. And for everything else, we create a data dictionary at the back so that you can leaf through and just understand the information. Yes, it takes a little bit of time, but that's what ChatGPT is for nowadays. They can just do that for you. So building a data dictionary helps that information and helps people just, again, build that empathy and understanding of the data that you're trying to from a visual perspective. Remember, it's all about people, empathy, relevance, format, elegance, context, text, and color. You're free to go. So, yeah. any questions. If not, don't worry. It's all good. Yes. Yes. Oh. Do you bring the microphone to them? I think this gentleman had his hand up bravely.
Which
What is your preferred tool for visualization?
Say that again, sorry.
What is your preferred tool for visualization? Because some can do really complicated visualization, some can keep it simplistic.
Yeah, that's a really good point of view, actually. So predominantly our clients work in e-commerce. So when we come to reporting back, we'll design based on enterprise levels, really. So there's a few that we do use. Tableau is really good. Power BI, we hold licenses for, which is good, and we're accredited to do good visualization for that one. Sadly, I actually really enjoy Data Studio, to be fair. I think because of the blank canvas in all three allows you to be creative. And quite frankly, if we think about a PowerPoint slide that's an empty slide and you can put things in things like Excel, you turn the grid lines off, it becomes just the same blank canvas. So any one of the tools that you can use, of the whole myriad of them, once you get into that creative stage, they're all just as useful. For us specifically at McCann, yeah, we work with e-commerce clients, so it makes sense to use enterprise tools like those specific three, which are the generic ones we can share and use and have all the functionality that they would want particularly. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's welcome. Anyone else?
Yeah, thank you very much for the talk. You were explaining that it is important to kind of cater, obviously find the business, to say the kind of key that your customer is looking for, and you really have to put a lot of effort into finding that at the beginning before you start visualizing something. I was wondering if, is there a way you think to cater to a more general audience? Because sometimes if you have a general dashboard, say, you might, as the client, not necessarily know what your customers are like. So say for Aldi, for example, it's kind of the general population, isn't it? So how do you design a dashboard that appeals to everybody? Do you have different kinds of sections so that you have, you know, more text or more numbers? Or do you have to, can you personalize this maybe if you come in as a customer and say, this is the type of visual I'd like to see? How do you cater to that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Actually, we've done that really recently. So we have a client who have different sections, different stakeholders that want to see different information. So because we're doing multi-channel, so it's not just SEO and PPC and AdWords and Google Ads and things like that, they want a rounded view of that information. So they have a marketing manager that's really good at that, can understand that information. So we built specifically for her. But they also have an owner who likes to sit in his yacht and go through his tablet and just have a presentation on how the business is doing. So to get the two things to marry up together, because he will give more direction and want to ask questions, like some people will just dive into that data and find their own story, and that can be complicated. Whether true or false, all data should be accurate and they should have a chance to be able to dive in and experience it. So in this case, we built in one completely separate, which is all about text and just had very minimal graphs. So it's basically, all right, your Google ads are performing this way. Don't worry about the rest. Your marketing team's fine. They've got it, and they've got all the information. So to answer that question, I think the best thing to do, if you've got multiple stakeholders that are across different diversifications of the business that they're in, it's better to do multiple different variants of the report, house them in a hub, and then they can all link and go across, which we do with some of our fiscal clients. So fiscal is a really important point, actually. If accountancy comes into it and data governance, it decrees what level of visualization you can put into it. So you have to be really careful, and that's where things like Edward Tuff's design, which is show everything in minimalistic design, as opposed to being more creative with, you know, a tea company, for example, or a car manufacturer, something like that. So there's lots of different things at play that stop you from doing, like limitations, if you will. But the ceiling is as far as you can push it. But you kind of find that out at the briefing stage, and you'll know at that point how many different reports you're going to have to do and duplication of them, which is fine as well. Does that make sense? Nice. Anyone else? It's 5 minutes. There's two. There's one at the back and then this gentleman here. Sorry, that one there, and this gentleman.
Have you heard of Chat GPT code interpreter and how it creates visualizations? And you think that's going to be a tool for being creative, or is it going to be very generic?
I really panicked about this question on the train coming down because I knew it was going to come up. Yeah, we were tasked recently to look at the role of AI within the agency, and there's no hard and fast rule on this one. Let me break it down. Will we use it? Yes. Am I fearful of it? No, I think it's an opportunity, and I think it's something we can do. I've not used the tool yet for myself, but because we have a relatively small team and most of our clients in that sector will still work with what we've got, I think it does play a massive role. This is about as vague an answer as I can get off the stage, to be quite honest. I'll speak to you about it afterwards. Yeah, I embrace technology in that sense. I think it's a really good thing to do. I've not seen it enough to be able to tell you exactly how far that would go, if that makes sense. But yeah, but maybe if you've seen it, I'd love to have a chat about it afterwards. That'd be superb. There was this gentleman just down here, smiling, being brave at the front.
Thanks. I had a question about, I suppose, your kind of team structure, because I'm guessing there's you and a team of kind of analysts and visualization specialists at McCann, but then I guess other people who are like the channel specialists doing the day-to-day work. I wondered how you kind of interface with them to kind of, I suppose, report to them as an internal client, but also get their insights to feed into the reports you create?
Yeah, that's a wicked question. That's a really good question. So again, one of the biggest limitations are the client accountant team. I'll say it really quietly, but because they, in terms of internal governance, let's say, and I think this is going down the point you're asking, hopefully it is. So if we've got a report that we've generated for a client, it has to get passed off first. I can say, yes, it's absolutely fine, but the account team will want to see it. And so that can have its own limitations because that might feel it doesn't meet the expectations. It might be portraying a slightly different story than what you're trying to portray, and then it all answers more awkward questions for them. So there are some times when they go, no, that's too left field, so let's do that. In answer to that other point, though, and I think this is really important about the data team, we tap into the global network. In fact, one of the ladies sat right behind you that I work with in Universal McCann. And I think that's really good because when you can network in places like this as well specifically, and you can talk to people about different things that they do, and you can get the answers really quickly to what you need to do in your next steps. So where our team is really small, what I do is as the information passes through me, I'll check it and say, yes, that's really good. Does that meet our brief for our client? Superb, it can go. But actually, to be able to get to that point, because we're all right-sided, we need help to do all the structured stuff and the data stuff on the left-hand side, which is very difficult to do, and that's why we reach out to the wider partners in the group that we have. And I think at some way, I don't know if this is right, Karen, but we had 250 different specialists that we can tap into to be able to get the right level of what we need. And different clients and different internal stakeholders will need a different solution completely than an external stakeholder would need. And the different levels of visualization have to be different as well. So again, just jumping back to that second point without waffling too much, I'm conscious of time, is that, again, that level, and this is what you said as well, so you can have multiple stages of report suites, an internal one that gives more information for the internal teams, and then a top-level one that's designed for clients at the same time. So it feels like more hard work, but I'm always the passion that if you do the hard work up front, it means that the rest of your maintenance time for forever and a day then is much easier going forward. I think that answers the question, I hope, to a point. Okay. That's 1 minute, I think. Yes, it's at the back.
So my question is regarding the example you gave about being right-brained, where you deal more with being creative with data. So in the field of data analysts, it's kind of expected to also know how to analyze the data, not just focusing on this other part. But seeing as you've spoken about it, do you think that in the future that data visualizers is something that could be more popular, like job roles, just that?
Yeah, it's becoming, I think on the very first slide, or towards the beginning when we looked at it, the change, rapid change that we've seen over the last decade or so, because the wealth of information that is coming through in all our lives, not just business lives, but everything that we do, is huge. And so the precipice of information that drops off is the percentage is growing bigger and bigger and bigger of the things we actually do use. Sorry, the things that we don't use. And it's getting more narrow to the things that the information that we do use that's important for what we're trying to portray. So it's only going to get bigger. And I think that's the role of the visualization. So Forbes said, about 2 years ago, I think, that the biggest rise in data jobs over the next decade, so that will take us into 2030, will be the role of the data storyteller and the visualization. Now that goes back to your, I don't know if he's still at the back, about AI technology as well, is that will also help build that and become more important and more prevalent over time. So we've seen it now from some of the tools that we use, is that, you know, like Google Analytics 4 is a really good example with the insights tool it's got and the exploration tools it's got. It's starting to be machine learning anyway. So yes, it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. The more information that we create, the more the role. That's why they work independently. You will always have a need for visual. And when I mean visualization, I don't just mean like really trendy charts. I mean, as soon as you present data, that's visualization. So even an Excel spreadsheet with everything on is a visualization of the data that sits behind. So the more of that, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.